Thank you so very much for your indulgence. We are now broadcasting live on YouTube. Dr. Mmutle will shortly drop the YouTube link here for all of you. You can share and disseminate in the circles. Anyone who may want to join the conversation there, they are more than welcome to do so. Today we are taking our discussion a notch higher, and to those who just who are just joining now on YouTube, welcome, and thank you so much for your attendance to this all-important research seminar series. We're taking our discussions a notch higher, where we're talking about research title formulation, some tips on background of the study, how to go about working in your research proposal, how do you work on your theoretical framework. These are some of the tips that are going to be shared with you relating to how do you plan, formulate your study. We are now looking at your research proposal, especially for those who are in their initial stages of their research. And we are so appreciative of the assistance that we are receiving from our two presenters, Dr. Liburu Masihu from the University of South Africa and Dr. Tolulope Osayomi from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. Thank you so very much, colleagues, for joining us. We appreciate you spending time to come and share your experiences. And without any waste of time, may I present to you our first presenter, Dr. Liburu Masihu. As I've indicated, she is from the University of South Africa, and she's currently a lecturer there in the Department of Social Work. And she is responsible for carrying out teaching and research activities in the Department of Social Work. Prior to her work as a lecturer, she served as a social worker at the Department of Social Development, particularly in the Ditsobotla service point in the Northwest Province, where she practiced as a generic social worker. She obtained both her undergraduate and postgraduate qualifications here at Northwest University. And currently her research interests are on gender issues, gender-based violence, especially against women and children. She's also, her research focus is in empowerment of women in particular. She has published a number of articles from these thematic areas, and she was awarded a scholarship by the National Institute for the Humanities and Social Science for the years 2017 to 2019. Allow me to welcome Dr. Liburu with her presentation on some tips, some experiences, some advice on research title formulation. How do you go about, ensuring that what you are going to be researching about, that proposal has, qualifies certain checks that are required. I will stop my screen and allow you, Dr. Liburu, to share yours and take over the platform. You have 40 minutes for your presentation, and thereafter we'll allow time for Q&As. Thank you. You can open your mic.
Thank you, Dr. Molale, for that welcome. Can you kindly confirm if you are able to see the presentation?
I can confirm we can see a presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. And without further ado, colleagues, I will just share with you just simple tips, if I may put it like that, on how to formulate a research title, background of the study, problem statement, the rationale, and the theoretical framework. The first and foremost thing that one should think about when embarking on the postgraduate study or a research is to firstly ask yourself what a research is and what is the purpose of the research in a postgraduate level. Research here is explained or is described as looking and looking again. Secondly, as searching and searching again. Basically, it means that the information has been searched or it has been looked at prior, and therefore you are looking at it again. The purpose, therefore, is to, at the postgraduate level, we say that research is a systematic and a rigorous investigation of a specific phenomenon. So once you have an idea what research is, then you can perhaps ask yourself, now that I know that I'll be looking at something that has been looked prior, or I'm searching on something that has been searched before, what is it then is expected from me? The first thing that you need to do is then to formulate a research title. Then how do you go about formulating a research title? The first thing that you need to do, I say sit back, relax. Why am I saying sit back and relax? I'm saying this because often as researchers, we find ourselves being anxious, being nervous, experiencing a lot of feelings, mixed feelings when we are about to start with our research studies. In that process of having those mixed feelings, what do you need to do? You have to generate a topic of ideas by consulting the literature that is available to you. Then the other thing that you need to do, colleagues, is to brainstorm on your topic. The first thing, as I've indicated, you generate the topic ideas by consulting the literature. For instance, you are working as a social worker, I'm working as a generic social worker. How do I then generate topic ideas? I see clients every day, people come to my office complaining about their problems. I watch the news, I see the problems that are on rife in South Africa. From those things, now I generate topic ideas, smaller ideas. Then after that, I go to the literature, I search on what I have observed. Then after that, I consult with my colleagues, consult with my peers, consult with my friends before actually you go to register, so that they can advise you whether what your idea carries weight or it will make an input. Once you have received validation or confirmation from the peers, now you can narrow your topic, you fill in your application. Then if it's successful, you'll be accepted into the program. Then you will meet with your supervisor as well, who will guide you based on the topic that you have identified. And the topic that you have identified, colleagues, should be something of interest to you. Why am I saying this? It's because you will spend half, if not more than half of your life investigating on that idea, on that concept, on that object, or on that social problem that you have identified. Therefore, if it is interesting to you, then you will have passion for it, and you will also divine some means on how to go about conducting or pursuing your research. And in that process, you must also ask yourself, what sort of things or objects or ideas or people you want to look at it again. In that process, think harder and think deeply. And I'm going to say this again, sit back and relax, because in that process of thinking and thinking again, of sitting back, of relaxing, you will then have an idea of to say, oh yes, this is indeed what I want to focus on. And then after then you have agreed with your supervisor, or you have agreed with the university on the topic that you are going to pursue, You must now work with your supervisor while you are also looking at the literature to narrow your topic down. However, you must be careful in such a way that you do not narrow your topic to the extent that you will struggle to find information. And I will give you tips on how to do that. Now, how can you narrow your title? You can narrow your title by adding or eliminating the following. Remember, your idea starts as a general concept or as a broader idea. Now, for it to qualify for your studies, it must be narrowed, and for it to make sense and for it to be manageable to you, it must be narrowed. How then can you narrow your topic? The first thing that you can do, perhaps you can add or eliminate the time on your title, or maybe you focus your research title on a specific problem and at a particular geographical location. A specific population, I refer to perhaps you focus on males or females, adults, a certain nationality. That's how then you can narrow your topic. A narrowed topic is simply to work with, and it will help you to remain within the boundaries, so you won't be all over the place. This is an example that I'm sharing with you on how I narrowed my topic. As Dr. Molale indicated, that I have an interest on gender issues and gender-based violence against women. Firstly, when I did my master's, I went on to the search, and it was back then 2012. By then, gender-based violence was not as, popular as it is currently. So I went on to the search, then I realized that, okay, this is an issue. Me as a lady coming from the rural area, seeing how women have been, experiencing violence, then I said, this is indeed what I want to pursue. And as you can see on the left side there, it's gender-based violence in South Africa. However, this concept is broad, and I cannot study as broad concept for my master's, and I had to narrow it, gender-based violence against women. But still, it is broad. There are many aspects that can one look into within gender-based violence against women. Then I said, gender-based violence as a risk factor for HIV and AIDS among women in Ngaka District, Northwest Province. That's how my title was narrowed for my master's. And the same formula, I used it to narrow or to work on my PhD thesis. That's what I did. And when you develop your title, colleagues, it must be clear, it must be appropriate, it must be meaningful, brief, and it must have an impact, preferably between 12, if we say it's long, or maximum 15 words. If it is longer, divide it in such a way that you have a subtitles. You cannot have a long title as if it is a sentence. No, it must be short, it must be brief, and it must be clear. And remember, we said that a title gives the reader the overall purpose of the study. So if a person reads your title, automatically the person must have an idea at the back of their minds to say, oh, then I'm expecting this in the introduction and going down to your research proposal or research document. And sometimes the topic is so narrow to an extent that you struggle to find information, or you struggle to fulfill the requirements to search for the data. I'm sharing now, colleagues, the tips on how you can move or you can expand your title. The first thing that you can do is to select the keywords to use as search terms for your study. For instance, okay, I will come to the examples. That is the first step. Identify the keywords and the central ideas of your topic and write them down. And remember, here we are talking about the topic that is too narrow, and we are trying to broaden it so that we get more information. After that, you can refine your search by using controlled vocabulary. What do I mean by this? Firstly, as I've indicated, you identify the keywords from the original topic and research question. In my case, it was gender-based violence against women. Because in other places or in other parts of the world, gender-based violence is used, or other authors or other scholars refer to it as violence against women or femicide. For me to be able to get more information, I used these two synonyms: violence against women and femicide. These synonyms helped me actually when I wanted to see the prevalence of GBV or the femicide or the killings of women globally in Africa and in South Africa, and consequently in the Northwest where the study was conducted. When I also struggled, then I used up the controlled vocabulary terms. And here I say victims of abuse or victims of violence or survivors of violence. In this way, then you do not struggle much. Then you will get information and you can actually enhance your study. And on step number 2, generating synonyms for keywords. If one term retrieves too much or little information, try a synonym, because in certain instances, the databases or the catalog recognizes other words. For instance, you'll find that the catalog might recognize violence against women, and at another time it may recognize GBV. So you must be flexible when you actually search for your key terms on the internet. And now that we have an idea on how to develop how to broaden a narrow topic, then we can proceed now with formulating the background of the study. In simpler terms, ladies and gentlemen, the background lays the foundation of what you want to tell the reader or what you want to report on. It sets the tone, and it must directly link with your title. If the title is on gender-based violence against women in Ngaka district, therefore, as a reader, I expect to see that gender-based violence against women. Nothing else beyond this. Therefore, how I structure my introduction should actually be informed by the title that I have formulated. Importantly, ladies and gentlemen, the introduction should take a funnel approach, which incorporates in certain instances the historical development of the problem from both an evolutionary and the substantiative point of view. The introduction shouldn't be too long. at least 1.5 page. Also, again, depending on the requirements of the university. And remember, it's just to set the tone. So it shouldn't be long. Otherwise, if it's long, you'll tend to lose direction and you'll end up reporting on things that do not relate with your title. Then when you do your introduction, ladies and gentlemen, gather as much information as possible. Consult the literature as much as you can about the topic under investigation. And you must provide an introductory statement. What the topic is about, with which population, why is it important, and what benefits does it hold in your field. And you state why there is a problem in that population, why more research is needed, and also what research has been done already. You can back this up, for instance, with statistics about the prevalence of the problem. And this actually must be done in consultation with your supervisor. And it must move in a funnel approach. What do I mean when I say it must move in a funnel approach? It means that you must start reporting the problem globally, narrowing it down to, if for instance, I'm here in Gauteng, in South Africa, and I'm looking into the struggle of widowhood. I start firstly by explaining what widowhood is and how am I looking at it, from which angle. Then I'm looking at it from the struggles of widows in Gauteng province or in Mmutle village. Firstly, I will explain what widowhood is and the widows. Then I explain it globally. Globally, how many widows are there, looking into different countries, China, different continents, coming to Africa, coming to South Africa, and locating it in Mmutle village where the study will take place. Now that we have moved, or we have done it in a funnel approach, you must now, when you get to the local context, describe it clearly, that in South Africa, how the problem is, or how is it affecting a specific population. Describe the state of knowledge about the subject, what has been done. For instance, like I say here, what is known already about the topic, what is missing, and what is more needed. And importantly, is there a problem, ladies and gentlemen? Because if then there is no problem, then there is no need for us to conduct this research. And if we say, and if the literature confirms that indeed there is a problem, then why does the problem exist? Then you indicate that at the end of your introduction, you must end off by stating the gap, the need for this research to be conducted because of the situation that I've just described. Now, coming to the problem statement. Problem statement, ladies and gentlemen, it's self-explanatory. It's what is the problem? Now that you've given us the background, the context, what others have said, you as the researcher, what is the problem? The problem statement is the gap actually that exists within that the phenomenon that you are looking into. And it must clearly evolve from the introduction, and it must hint at the practical and the literature aspect of the problem. When you do this, you must set out different points of views and assumptions in an unbiased way. And again, it must be congruent with the title, with the aim, questions or question and the objectives. So it must logically build up towards that phase. And it must be clear. There are positive problem statements and there are also negative problem statements. So depending on the route that you as a researcher are embarking on, you must at least at the end of that section be able to tell your problem statement in just one sentence. For instance, the gap might be that there is incongruence between what the policy says and what has been implemented on the field. For instance, you can see that, perhaps let me bring it to my profession, that most social workers actually are not knowledgeable about a particular subject, and yet they are required to provide a specific service to clients. Therefore, I take that and I make it the gap. Or for instance, one of my colleagues was looking into the experiences of children raised by single mothers, not from the negative point of view, but from a positive point of view, from the strength-based perspective. She was not interested on the challenges that they experienced, but rather how that single woman or that single mother managed to raise successful kids without the help of the father. That's how then you can formulate your problem statement. And remember what I said, that the golden rule for research, for formulating a research problem, is just to be able to state it in just one sentence. Just say at the end, the problem statement of this research is 1, 2, 3, 4. After formulating the research, these are the tips. These are the tips on how to formulate the research problem. It shouldn't be too long. It must also be specific and precise, and it must be coherent logically, and it must be organized. And each paragraph here on both the background and the problem statement must focus on a specific theme. And I will always tell my students that just count on the page. The page normally has 25 lines. You will decide to say, out of the 25 lines in one page, how many paragraphs am I setting for each page? And if I say, for instance, I divide my paragraphs by 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, then each paragraph there must focus on a specific theme. You cannot be talking about statistics on the first paragraph, then when I go to the 4th paragraph again, I find again statistics. Or you cannot mix the impact, the prevalence on the same paragraph. No, those paragraphs must flow nicely. They must talk to each other from the top up until the last sentence. Now that we know how to write our introduction, how does it flow? How do we connect it to the problem statement? We come here to the rationale, the reason why are you conducting this study. Rationale is just the reasoning or the inspiration behind your proposal or behind your research. It can come from various sources, ladies and gentlemen. It can come either from the clinical experience, from practice. It can also come from curiosity. And when you write this section, you must clearly articulate to the reader to say that there are various forms or there are various sources where one draws inspiration. However, for this particular research, the inspiration comes from or will come from these sources. Firstly, practice, Secondly, curiosity. Then you explain. If you're saying it comes from clinical practice, explain to say what is happening in the clinical practice or in the clinical experience. As a social worker, I receive or I deal with more cases of gender-based violence. And these cases are reported by women. So that is one of the clinical experiences. Or I have observed that most of the social workers struggle when interacting with clients or with victims of gender-based violence. And this, for instance, can be those social workers who are doing maybe perhaps generic work. And we know that the gender-based violence is a complex issue, and therefore it needs a highly skilled practitioner to deal with it. So me, as a generic social worker doing 10 other programs, I will not have sufficient time to assist clients coming with such a problem. And that can also be one of the inspiration from the clinical experience. Or alternatively, for curiosity's sake, or maybe the problem has been put on the national agenda, like we've seen that the GBV in South Africa has been prioritized in the president's office. And that could be one of the reasons why am I pursuing my studies on this problem. And and again, me as a woman, I've noticed how other women actually experience it or how they are victimized. And for curiosity's sake, then I am pursuing my studies on that particular subject. And the rationale, ladies and gentlemen, addresses the question relating to the significance of the study. Why is this study important? And also it addresses the inconsistencies and the challenges in the literature. Through the rationale, you build an argument in a nutshell to the reader that the research is worthwhile and conducting it could contribute to more research, literature, social policy, effective, practices, or participants' interest. And also the rationale must relate or must gel with the problem statement, the background, and also the title of the study. It must also move in a way that, it helps you to move towards your research question, your research aims, and your objectives. Also, now that we have moved from the background down to the problem statement, down to the theoretical, down to the rationale, we come here to the theoretical framework. What is a theoretical framework and why do we use a theoretical framework? The first and foremost thing is that you need to understand what a theory is. A theory helps us to understand a phenomenon or a social problem. And in research or in practice, theories are developed to explain a phenomena, to draw conclusions and make predictions. So by adopting a particular theory, I will understand how gender-based violence manifests. How does it evolve? Who is the perpetrator? How the perpetrator behaves? Who is the victim? And how the victim behaves. And in the theoretical framework, you explain or you look into different theories that support your research and showing that your research actually is grounded in established ideas. Because this problem has been there for quite a long time. Therefore, I can't wake up today and just decide that I'm using this theory that actually has not been tested or that is not actually based on established ideas. And before you start with your proposal, explore what theories, explain what models and other researchers have developed already. And therefore, you will have an idea of what theory can you then adopt for your study. And you must also explain why are you using that theory. And the theoretical framework must fit and must be relevant to the study in question. It must be clearly integrated and applied to the phenomenon under investigation. So you must be able to describe what that theory is, the concepts of that theory, and then explain to the reader to say, in this study, I am using this theory for this purpose, and this is how I'm using this theory. And in most instances, we use the theory, as I've indicated, to explain the phenomenon. Then at a later stage, you'll actually see whether the theory conforms with your findings, or maybe it doesn't corroborate with the research findings. Now, tips to formulate the theories, firstly, is to identify your key concepts. The first step is to pick out the key concepts from the problem statement, introduction, and research questions. And concepts often have multiple definitions. So the theoretical framework involves clearly defining what is meant by each term. And the second step is to evaluate and explain the relevant theories. By conducting the literature review, you can determine how other researchers have defined and drawn connections between these key concepts. Then as you write your theoretical framework, you aim to compare and to critically evaluate these approaches and actually see whether they gel with your study. And the third thing that you need to do is to show that how, as I've indicated, how the theory that you have selected fits into your study. And in most cases, ladies and gentlemen, or in complex situations, you can use more than one theory. And also depending on the level of the studies where you are at, honors level, master's and PhD, and also the problem that you are investigating, you can use one and you can use more than one theory. For instance, for my PhD, I was looking into a victim empowerment program. I was evaluating the victim empowerment program, the services offered there by social workers to see if they're effective in addressing gender-based violence. And there I used the empowerment approach, and I also used the feminism perspectives, radical, social. So I used those feminism's perspectives. And at the end, I described each of it and then applied it to my study. And then at the end, I indicated, why am I using these two? Firstly, my study was on victim empowerment program, which is concerned about empowerment, and also gender-based violence. Then I used the feminism's perspective to explain how GBV occurs and the empowerment approach on how social workers can use it to empower victims of GBV. Then at the end, I actually realized that both the feminism's perspectives and the empowerment approach have one common goal, that is empowerment of women or empowerment of my research participants. Then that's how I synergized the two theoretical frameworks in one study. So I will just pause there for now and see if there are questions or comments.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Liburu. Quite an interesting presentation, very clear, concise, and I loved, some tips, hacks that you were sharing with us. Identifying keywords, applying control vocabulary. There are instances where you say we have got to, in our introduction and background, follow a funnel approach where you trace the issue, the problem in a global context, a more broader context, and then you narrow to a continental context, if you will, or in our case, we can say across Africa, or you can even choose to say sub-Saharan Africa. And then you come to maybe your region in terms of your SADC region or Southern Africa region, if this is your space. Others would say, okay, the Western African perspective, and then you further narrow down to your national, in your country. Is it Senegal? Is it South Africa? Botswana? Is it Zimbabwe? And then you come then to your region, your localized region where your problem is focused. So we thank you for that. I also loved it when you just summarize the issue of a problem statement. You can say the golden rule with the problem statement is that you must be in a position to state it in one sentence. If it is too complex to state it in one sentence, you have got to look at it again and try to rephrase and re-strategize. When working with your rationale for your study, you are telling us also that it addresses the questions relating to your study's significance. So you need to then ask yourself, so what? Why is my study important? Then it helps you to work on your rationale statement. Thank you so very much for this, Dr. Liburu. And I want to give to Dr. Mmutle to field the questions. And might I also take this opportunity to thank our colleagues who have joined us, Ms. Chichi Chilombo Banda and Annette Degenaar. Dr. Mmutle, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Molale, and thank you, Dr. Liburu Masiho, for this wonderful and informative presentation. I take it that you have laid the basic foundation of one, formulating a title, going about doing your introduction and background, and addressing what you call a concise and context-based problem in your own research, going along the lines of your rationale, your theoretical framework, which forms the basis of what a research proposal should be or should herald. And most importantly, therefore, you have shared with us your own experiences. I like the manner in which you have referred to your own experiences when you were doing your master's, equally when you were doing your PhD. So those experiences are quite nice. And I think this is what these sessions are all about, sharing expertise, sharing our own insights. And while we share these insights, it should be made clear that none of us, therefore, possess the monopoly of this expertise. That's why now we have the opportunity to share amongst us and to inform each other. By so doing, therefore, we attempt to contribute to to our own worldviews and allow ourselves, therefore, for other individuals to contribute to the manner in which we shape our own worldviews going forward. I like the way in which, therefore, you have situated your presentation. It was quite concise and very nice, and I'm going to take this opportunity, therefore, to at least take questions. I see a hand, but before I take the hand from Dr. Degenaar, let me take the question on the chat. Richard Adeleke, the question reads as follows: when it comes to research gap, can a different study area be a research gap even if such study has been carried out elsewhere? Dr. Liburu, that is the question from Richard Adelke. If the question is not clear, we would request Richard Adelke to at least say something in relation to the question. Then we would take Dr. Annette Degenaar. Thank you, Dr. Liburu.
Okay. if I have not answered Richard, then he can actually elaborate further on the question. He's saying, can a different study area be a research gap? Yes, a different research area can be a gap. For instance, if you are doing a study on intimate partner violence in urban area, obviously the experiences of people in the urban area versus the experiences of people living in the rural area are not the same. Therefore, if more research has been done in a particular area, and you can see that in a rural area, for instance, there is limited research, then that can actually justify for that in South Africa, maybe in rural areas, then there is dearth of literature concerning a particular problem, then it can justify to serve as a gap in that context. I'm not sure if I've answered the question.
Thank you, Dr. Liburu. Richard, are you satisfied with the response? Does it answer your question?
Yes, I am. It's fine. I'm satisfied.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Can we now take the hand from Dr. Direna? Annette?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to start my video also. I can just say thank you, Dr. Liburu. I find it very interesting. My PhD was on strategic communication in child protection organizations. So you being a social worker, I really, really enjoyed it. I just want to ask you something that has always been something that I'm thinking about is when you get your inspiration from practice, as you discussed. There's always a fine line for me between, you said unbiased, the problem statement in an unbiased way, but coming from practice also, I find it always a difficult concept between being unbiased and finding your rational or your purpose from practice, as you discussed. I don't know if my question is clear, Doctor.
Thank you, Annette. Dr. Liburu, over to you.
Okay. To some extent, because we are there and we are working there, therefore you've got some. You are biased to to a certain extent. However, when you write or when you conduct the research, yes, I think on Monday we talked about the principles of reflexivity, so that when you report with a clean slate, especially when writing the problem. Just try as much as you can to report, in an unbiased way. Don't come to conduct research while you know that the results will be like this. Otherwise, then there's no need for you to come to conduct research, because already, or you are biased. You are conducting research. For instance, I was doing research on gender-based violence against women. And already when I enter into the research field, I enter with a negative mind towards men. You understand? Because most women have come to report that their partners or they have been raped by men, for instance. And when I go into the field or when I interact with the participants, already I've got that negative vibe. So I must try by all means to be clean as much as I can when entering into the research platform. And I should know that when I enter into my research, I wear the cap of a researcher, versus when I go to the office on Monday, when I'm doing therapy or I'm doing counseling. There, I'm not a researcher. I'm basically there with clients for the purposes of therapy or family reunification or whatever purpose. But once I come to the studies, then I'm saying I am a researcher. So that's how I try actually to differentiate between the two.
Thank you, Doctor. That is very insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leburu, and thank you, Annette. And I take it that you could more relate simply because of Annette, as you have indicated that your research now was on more or less the same approach or rather
Yes.
area of
Very
interest.
interesting. Thank you.
Work itself. So thank you very much, Annette. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, I have one in the chat so far. Galaxy A31, I'm sorry for that, as I cannot identify the individual, says, is it possible to get, okay, the presentation, yes, the presentation will be made available to everyone. I would ensure that myself and Dr. Molale address that. Another question is that from Hamza, what if the area of interest of the researcher doesn't have any standard theory or models? That is the question. You can take that one, Dr. Leburu.
Okay, if the area of interest doesn't have any standard theory or model, you go to the sister disciplines. If you are in communication, you look into maybe other fields within the humanities or other fields within the social sciences. Then you look what what other researchers have done prior to you and which theories have they borrowed from other disciplines. Then you can actually say that there's no a standard theory for this. Then you went on to borrow this theory from this discipline, and this is how it was used, and you justify why are you using it for your study.
Thank you, Dr. Leburu, for that wonderful answer. I hope, Hamza, are you satisfied with the response in relation to whether, if or rather, what if an area of interest does not necessarily have a particular standard theory or model or the theoretical framework, as you normally say? Are you satisfied with the answer from Dr. Leburu? I see your yes, thank you. Any other question, colleagues? Compliments, comments are more than welcome. And I'm sure Dr. Leburu would be much more happier with compliments as well. Yes, Infinix Hotline, I see you. You can pose your question. Infinix? Can we have another question, colleagues? Anyone? You can simply open your mic. You are noted.
Hi, colleagues. Hope it is well. Tim Sostole. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I like how the first presenter, if I'm not mistaken, sorry, I'm in the office, but the presentation on the theoretical frameworks and how they are linked. I think that was helpful because I think the challenge that I had on my research was what informs the theoretical work, theories, framework, and to what extent do we link them back to the next chapter. So for me, it's a comment. I think I like how she articulated that particular, also providing examples. Thanks.
Thank you, Stembiso. A comment for you, Dr. Leburu, on the manner in which you presented the theoretical framework and how, therefore, Mr. Stembiso was able to make sense, most importantly, from your own articulation of what informs the theoretical framework in a particular research study. Any other question, colleagues, comments? Feel free to ask. In the absence of comments or questions, colleagues, and compliments, I would give Dr. Leburu to give at least the closing remarks of her presentation. Dr. Leburu.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. In closing, I just want to say that take it easy. Research is not an easy thing to do, and our experiences are unique. And let us try by all means to enjoy every part of it. And what I used to say to my students is that let's reduce the other things outside the research thing. For instance, I know that we are people, we are socialized beings, but when you start now pursuing your postgraduate studies, know that you will miss church, you will miss family functions, you will be absent in most of the aspects of your life. However, the benefits and the reward and the process is just amazing. So let's enjoy every minute of it, and let's engage like this, engage with peers. Don't die in isolation, connect with other people, read a lot, take time, manage time accordingly, and you're going to make it. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leburu. I think I can nicely relate with your last sentiments there, that don't die alone. Converse with other people. That's how scholars are built, in fact. What you don't know, somebody might know. Through the process of conversations, interacting with others, you would be channeled towards a particular perspective which you were not necessarily aware of. So with those few words, thank you, Dr. Leburu, for this wonderful presentation. I don't have much to say, you were spot on, and I hope that our participants as well were able to enjoy this particular session as delivered by yourself, Dr. Molale.
Thank you, Dr. Mmutle. And Dr. Leburu, thank you once again for your insightful presentation. We are now moving towards our second presentation. The idea behind these postgraduate seminar series in communication studies is to, borrow insights from the experiences of our peers from different fields to come and help us make sense of certain elements of our postgraduate studies. Therefore, we are not claiming expertise, as Dr. Mmutle had said. It's a matter of sharing personal experiences, what has worked for us, what we have learned, and hopefully these lessons may help others who are going through the stages that we have passed, so that they can begin to make sense of this difficult path, this lonely path, which is research. The second presenter hails from Ibadan in Nigeria. We met attending a doctoral research seminar last year via Zoom, and we later connected in Twitter. Hence, he responded to my call in that space when I asked anyone who may want to be a guest lecturer to my students who I supervise. And today I'm quite happy to be presenting to you Dr. Tololupe Osayomi. He is a lecturer in the Department of Geography at the University of Ibadan, where he obtained his PhD in medical geography. He teaches research interests, or his teaching and research interests include disease mapping, spatial epidemiology, spatial analysis, geography of Nigeria and Africa, political economy of disease and health, environmental studies, road accidents and road safety in developing countries, just but to mention a few. He is a member of some reputable professional associations, such as the Association of the Nigerian Geographer, which is ANG, the American Association of Geographers, which is AAG, and Regional Studies Association, which is RSA, of the United Kingdom. In addition, he is a pioneer fellow from 2007, or in the 2007 cohort of the IFE Institute for Advanced Studies in IFE in Nigeria, and is a member of the Institute's management board. He published widely, as well as served as a reviewer to widely recognized journal titles such as the African Development Review, Ghana Journal of Geography, Weather, Climate and Safety, African Population Studies, Indilinga, Sexual Research and Social Policy, and African Geographical Review, among others. He is currently the director of the COVID-19 Mapping Laboratory at the Department of Geography in the University of Ibadan. Students, colleagues, I present to you Dr. Tulo Lupe, who will take the fourth from Dr. Liburu's presentation. We are talking research proposal. Tulo, Tolu, welcome.
Thank you very much, Bryce. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you, sir.
Oh, great. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. And thank you, Dr. Molale, for the kind invitation. I must thank the previous speaker for laying a very fine foundation on which my presentation will stand. I will quickly share my screen so you'll see my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. So I have been invited to speak on a topic which I have framed as the anatomy of a research proposal. There's some amount of overlap between my presentation and the previous speaker's presentation. But she did a very excellent job by providing an overview. So the presentation proceeds in the following manner. We have the introduction, the definition of a research proposal, which I also abbreviated as RP, and then the significance of the research proposal, its general characteristics, then the structure, then the components of the research proposal, and then also the conclusion. I would like to start on this premise, and that is the goal of research is the production of knowledge, right? It's essentially to advance the frontiers of knowledge. To advance the frontiers of knowledge. The starting point for every research is the research problem. Okay, and before you can actually, you have your finished product or your final output, you must start with a research proposal. Sometimes we do have puzzles, we do have questions we constantly ask ourselves, and we wonder why certain things have occurred or why are they occurring. And before we can actually execute the research, we have to prepare a plan, so to speak, or a statement of intent on how the research will be executed. And that document is known as a research proposal. It's known as a research proposal. It's an established practice in all over the world that undergraduate students and students, postdocs, and even faculty members have to present research proposals to all or any of the following for approval. For instance, if you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, definitely you would have to submit a research proposal to your advisor, who would actually have a look at it and then guide you on what needs to be worked upon, or what needs to be improved, what needs to be removed, and what needs to be added. And in fact, I do know that some universities request, if not all, for a research proposal before you can be granted admission into their graduate studies. So it's In some cases, it could be a requirement for, it could be an admission requirement. And then also, after you've had some time with your supervisor, formal discussions with your supervisor on, go back and forth, improving the quality of your proposal, you would have to present it to a dissertation or a thesis committee who would actually look at it and see if it is worthwhile. And in some circumstances, it might even be presented to the department as a whole to get constructive feedback. And also, well, this may not, well, it may apply to students, and it also applies to faculty members and also postdocs. Sometimes we compete for grants, and we need to, one of the requirements is to submit a research proposal, which would outline the research problem and how we intend to go about it, and also with a budget and so on and so forth. So when it's then submitted, and if it is found to be viable or good enough, then the grant is then awarded to the successful investigator. So what is a research proposal? A research proposal is a statement or a planning document of intent which shows how a study can be executed. Okay. There's also another definition we have which says that it's a clear statement of problems and sub-problems and the data and how it will be processed and interpreted. And I have a definition of my own, which says a document which discloses what the researcher wishes to investigate, why the researcher wants to investigate it, and how he intends to investigate, and what results the researcher is likely to arrive at. So these are definitions of the research proposal. But we need to also look what's the importance. Why is the research proposal very important? So first of all, we need to understand that it's a student's plan. Well, I'm now speaking within the context of this PG seminar series. It's a student's plan on how to execute a proposed research. Okay. Every academic session, I'm assigned a number of students, postgraduate students, be it undergraduate or postgraduate students. And when we first meet, I often ask that, okay, what would you like to do? Which area of geography, which is my discipline, would you like to focus on? And they tell me one or two things, and I just say, okay, fine, this looks doable. Would you like to do a proposal and let me see? Okay, so that proposal will actually disclose to me as the advisor or the supervisor what he or she would like to do. And then it's a mirror reflection of one's critical thinking, okay? Clarity of ideas and also quality of expression. Sometimes some students are in a hurry to put down their thoughts, and they hastily put down their thoughts and then they have their proposal submitted. And I look at it and I tell them that, look, you haven't taken time to reflect on what it is you really want to do. Because what I see here is, it's a bit shallow. You might need to, reflect deeply on the literature or internalize the information you have gathered from the literature. Okay? So it's very important that whatever is written in that document, you need to understand that whatever appears on the pages of that document is a reflection of you and your intellectual capacity. Because it actually brings to mind a proverb from where I come from that says that you will only be addressed based on how you present yourself. So the feedback you will get is a function of what you actually share with the world. Now, the characteristics of the research proposal. It's a very straightforward document, okay, which contains essential information. So you won't find, irrelevancies or redundant information in it. And it has a very formal or business-like tone, all right? There's no room for informality in a research proposal, okay? So that's why it's seems to be a very straightforward document. And also, direct and concise language is used, right? You need to be very, very clear, and you need to be very brief, okay? No long talk, so to speak. So it's very important. So that is why it's a straightforward document. And then it's not a work of art. So there's no use for flowery language. It would be very odd to read, some Shakespearean, well, unless you are working on Shakespeare, but to see some Shakespearean language in some of these write-ups, it would be very, very odd. So, but the point to be made is that if you need to effectively communicate to your audience in simple and clear terms, okay? And then also use the appropriate technical terms and jargons in your respective disciplines, right? The structure of a research proposal. I must emphasize, it's pertinent to note that there is no widely accepted format of the research proposal. It varies from one discipline to the other. So a proposal in the arts or the humanities could be different from that of a proposal from technology or engineering or basic medical sciences or any other field of endeavor. And it also depends on the institutional culture of one's department, okay? The proposal format here at the Department of Geography, University of Ibadan, might be different from what you have at the Department of Geography, Northwest University. That's if the Department of Geography exists there, all right? And also it varies from university to university. So, but however, there are basic concepts that are, or components that are common to all these fields with respect to the structure of the research proposal. Okay, so these are the elements of the proposal. So we have the title, we have the introduction, we have the background to study, research problem, significance, rationale, or justification. Then you have the aim and objectives. Then you have the hypothesis, and it's actually applicable to the social sciences and other disciplines that heavily rely on the scientific method, but not applicable to the humanities. Then you have the materials and methods, theoretical frameworks, literature review, and references. So we start with the title. Interestingly, this is the first item to be seen on a research proposal. And I was very glad when the previous speaker said quite a lot about the title, so I would not want to repeat much of the material that she shared with us, but I would just say that it gives a quick impression of the study to the reader, because it's the first thing that will be seen. And sometimes, so therefore it has to be well crafted, okay? The title must be well framed, okay? It must be seen to be very inviting, or in some cases arresting, okay? And then we should ensure that it's not lengthy. We should ensure it's not lengthy, but very succinct. In some institutions, I know in my university, especially with the postgraduate school, there's a limit. There are word limits. There's a word count for titles. I think it mustn't exceed 23 words if my memory serves me well. Then it also must be acceptable within the boundaries of your discipline. Okay. Sometimes we get put off when we see certain titles in our disciplinary spaces, and we ask ourselves, what is this? Does this have any connection with our discipline? Then also it must be legible, and it also must be comprehensible. It shouldn't be a title, a topic that would raise eyebrows or begin to raise more questions, okay, about the study. Now, following the title, you have your introduction, which is just a preamble, and it's also expected to provide information to the study, background information to the study. And also I also tell my graduate students that it's very important you provide a general view of the issue being examined, especially if it's an issue that is not too popular. Okay, so it's very, very important that you provide sufficient background on the phenomenon under investigation. And doing that, it helps to improve the reader's understanding of the research problem. So it's very important that that clarity of expression is very, very important when writing the introduction. And as the previous speaker did say, your introduction should be too lengthy. Okay. I sometimes, as a rule of thumb, I tell my students, I mean, maximum 2 pages. 1.5 to 2 pages is fine. You don't need to be too, it doesn't have to be too lengthy. Okay, I recall reading a proposal some years back, and it was a proposal whose introduction was run into 8 pages. Of course, I quickly turn off when I see very lengthy introductions. Now, the research problem. Okay, so it's simply saying, what am I after? So the research problem is just the heart of the research. Okay, it establishes the focus of the research, because without the research problem, there will be no rationale for the study. Okay, so it's a gap in knowledge. Okay, in fact, my research methods professor during graduate school did say that it refers to the intellectual or academic gaps for which there are no answers yet. Okay, so in simple terms, it's just what are the questions you intend to find answers to. All right, so one distinct feature of a research problem is that it must be researchable. It must be researchable, and it mustn't be a personal problem. A personal problem such as, why am I not rich? Okay, I mean, that's a personal problem. Okay, or why does my car refuse to start every Monday morning? Why does it refuse to start every Monday morning? These are personal problems, and these are not researchable problems. So research problems are found in the research frontiers. Okay, so if you recall what I said in my opening statement, that the goal of research is to produce knowledge, is the production of knowledge, all right? So we often find research problems in the uncharted territories of knowledge, okay? There's no end to knowledge production. So we keep discovering new things every day. We keep producing knowledge every day, all right? Now, let's just quickly look at the 2 typologies of research problems. We have the esoteric research problem and also the applied research problem. Okay, so the esoteric research problem stems from basic research. Okay, so you're just simply after, it's just the quest for the development of alternative theoretical or methodological approaches. Okay, so such research has academic value, or they are academically relevant. Okay, then we also have what we call applied research problems. Okay, so these are problem-oriented. This is problem-oriented research. So the knowledge produced from such research is for societal advancement, and therefore they have societal value. So, but again, you must ensure that your research problems are acceptable by disciplinary standards. Okay, I do know that there's a lot of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary research, but I do know that disciplines or departments and programs insist that they must conform to certain standards. So you must ensure that whatever it is you wish to embark upon must conform to your discipline's standards of your discipline. Still on the research problem. So your research problem must be identified, clearly defined, well thought, fully articulated, I beg your pardon, then also no ambiguity. So you shouldn't leave your audience guessing what it is you are trying to pass across. All right, so it's very important that you think, and your ability to think and also to interpret and synthesize is very central. All right, so these are 3 critical skills that you would need to be able to properly articulate your statement of problem. And then another thing you need to know is that research problems have no bounds, all right? If you probe further, it gets bigger and bigger. And if you are not careful, you might run into the trap of, not being able to manage your research. So that is why it's very important that your research problem should be carefully determined so as to have a manageable size. Now, the research problem can also be broken into smaller discrete units known as sub-problems, okay? And sub-problems can actually stand as separate sub-projects within the wider research. So here you might see some amount of overlap between sub-problems and objectives. They are more or less, they are synonymous, all right? So sub-problems are often stated in the research questions or in the objectives. But you must take note that they are not pseudo sub-problems. And what do I mean by pseudo sub-problems? These are town-bound challenges for the investigator, but not a problem of research. And I'll give you a few examples. I'm confused. I don't know which sampling technique or theory to adopt. Okay, that is a pseudo sub-problem. It's not a problem for investigation. Okay, or do I employ quantitative, qualitative methods, or both for my research? So that is another example of a pseudo sub-problem. So, but you must also bear in mind that the number of sub-problems should be within a manageable range. You shouldn't have too few and you shouldn't have too many. So, but that is also dependent on your conversation or the agreement you reach with your advisor or supervisor. Now, how do I come up with a research problem? There are a number of ways. The previous speaker did highlight that you could get from experience and observation. Yes, in addition to that, you can also come up with, there are different sources. For instance, the literature, okay? Books, journal articles, and other scholarly publications, all right? Then also from theory too, deduction from theories, all right? And I want to share a personal example here. I was doing some reading in the field of sociology, and I came across the theory, conflict theory. And I felt that it would be useful for a particular inquiry on commercial motorcycle riders in Nigeria. Okay, I wanted to see how the conflict theory would explain conflicts between commercial motorcycle riders and their passengers, and the law enforcement, with pedestrians, with the law enforcement agency, and also road users too. So I wanted to see. So that was possible because I had studied and I was able to deduce one or two things from that theory and decided to apply it to the study of commercial motorcycle riders. Then also refinement too. Theories are constantly refined and also extended. And then also new theories are being formulated too. So these are some ways which you can get. And then also groundbreaking research. I will say something about that very shortly. Reports of previous research projects and review papers. Sometimes, we do know that, for instance, PhD thesis, you would see that there's a section which is titled areas for further research, okay, where the investigator, the researcher, outlines a number of uncovered areas, okay? So that's a good way, a good place to get some very good ideas on what to do, okay? Then also review papers too, like the journal here on the top right corner of my screen is called The Progress in Human Geography. Now this journal publishes review papers, all right? So it does an extensive review of developments and issues in human geography. And there what they often do is they also lay out potential avenues of inquiry. So from there, if you are in need of ideas or you are in need of insights, it's a good journal to consult. Then also replication of a previous study. There was a question from Richard. This would address your question again. This would actually provide further information. So sometimes you have conflicts conflicting studies. So you might have to replicate that study, all right, to see what really is, what is the true situation of things. And also sometimes there may be methodological imperfections. So it's important that you need to replicate the study over and over till you get the desired results. Then also too, sometimes it might be necessary to replicate a study if you notice that there has been significant changes in time and in space too, okay? So these are the different reasons that would justify the replication of a previous study. I want to share another personal example. This is a study I carried out, which is on the effects of groundwater contamination on incidence of diabetes mellitus. This paper was originally conceived as a literature review, but in the course of my back and forth between the journal, the reviewers and the author, I got a lot of insights, and I found out that there were a lot of inconsistencies and contradictions in the relationship between groundwater contamination and diabetes mellitus. Okay, in some cases you find some, negative relationship. In some cases you had positive, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the so anyone who sees this would certainly be encouraged to actually carry out an empirical research to confirm. All right, so this is just to buttress the point on what I addressed as conflicting findings, and also too, because I also did mention in the paper that there have been studies to determine these effects on diabetes mellitus in Africa, to the best of my knowledge. So it would also spur an insightful reader to actually take a look at that. All right. Further words of advice, be alert for anomalies and paradoxes. If you're still really, really keen on coming up with a very good research problem. All right. So be alert for anomalies, paradoxes, and times that are accepted, and things that are accepted, but perhaps that they should not be. Now, significance. Now, this simply is just telling you the importance of the study to the academic community. All right, so you need to be very concise and straight to the point. And then also you must categorically state the research contribution to theory, methodology, and the body of knowledge as a whole. So essentially, what are you adding to the body of knowledge? So if you are not able to, you cannot adequately or sufficiently answer that question, then you have to go back to the drawing board. But you need to bear in mind that the best research projects or proposals are not the best written ones. They are the ones that make significant contributions to knowledge. Then you have the aim and objectives, all right? In some disciplines, you do have aims, in some no, okay? But here you have the aim, which is just the general goal of the research, all right? An example is the research aims to determine the effect of geographical distance on courtship among South African youth. I beg your pardon, South African youth. And then the objectives that would follow, okay? Again, this is synonymous with the sub-problems. They must be specific, measurable, and concise. For instance, you have determined the association between the number of community radios and the level of impoverishment, okay? So that with aim and objectives. Then you have the hypothesis. It's a tentative statement whose truth or falsity is to be tested or established. So at that point, it's neither true nor false. So it has to be tested. So an example of an hypothesis is a significant relationship exists between resource endowment and level of development in oil-rich countries. Okay, so it has to be tested. Okay, its truth or falsity is yet to be established. But it's also important to know that it's not mandatory in all fields, but it's a critical aspect of scientific research. And then you must also ensure that your objectives, your literature, and also your theories, they drive your hypothesis. And then also ensure that they are testable and also tested by the appropriate statistical techniques. Now, the methodology. Now, this is arguably the most carefully crafted section of the proposal. Okay, so it shows how the researcher intends to search for answers to research questions. So there are key components which you must take note of, and they are as follows: the data sources. So you need to clearly state the data required, then also state how they'll be secured, then also state how they'll be analyzed and interpreted, and then also how will they be graphically represented. Then also you need to take note of this. The nature of the data to be collected or analyzed strongly dictates the choice of the techniques of analysis, be it qualitative or quantitative methods. Now, the theoretical framework. Sometimes I hear students say, do I really need one? Yes, you do. It's the skeleton of the research, all right? So you could decide to use one or more, all right? But essentially, it's to determine the extent to which your research problem can be explained by the theory adopted. All right, so the essence is really to test the validity of that theory. So if you have a theory which says that the older a child is, the taller the child grows, all right? So that theory in a way has dictated the type of data you would collect, and it also will inform the construction of your hypothesis too. Okay, now theories too. If you are very, very interested in doing groundbreaking research or doing disruptive research, I would advise that you take theories or concepts from seemingly unrelated disciplines. For instance, this is the title of a paper I read many years ago when I was doing when I started my PhD. It was, paper written by a group of geographers from UCLA. And what they did was they took a theory from ecology, the field of ecology, to find the world's most wanted terrorist at the time. And that is Osama bin Laden. And it was really surprising to know that the results they arrived at were, had a very, very high level of accuracy. So that is what we call disruptive research. Now, literature review. Now, this shows how the study is related to a body of related literature. Okay, so what have others done in this area of research? How did they accomplish it? What were their findings? What are the strengths and limitations of this study? And then what makes your own work different from theirs too? So you need to ensure that in the review of the literature, you must make sure it's very comprehensive, and then ensure that the literature cited is current and relevant. All right, unless they are seminal works, you shouldn't be citing studies. Many of your studies shouldn't be within the time frame or time period of the 1960s. Okay, a lot of research. I recall a student who brought a proposal and he needed to, he provided a citation for the definition of biodiversity, and it was like a 200-year-old definition. Okay, and I told him, well, there are more recent definitions. Why don't you try out those ones? Then also don't plagiarize, because it's a punishable academic offense according to university regulation. Then references. I'm drawing close to the end of my presentation. References, well, they are conventionally found at the tail end of the research proposal, beg your pardon. And you have it's a long list, sometimes a long list of consulted, and an emphasis on consulted. But sometimes we see some students who feel they're clever, they just add references at the back to just give the supervisor or their readers a false impression they did a lot of reading. Okay, and then it must also be relevant. Then also use the recommended referencing style. APA, Harvard, Chicago, LA, Vancouver. All right, and it's possible that your university has developed its own citation style. Okay, like our university has its own citation style, and it is used for the dissertations and the thesis. Then also be consistent with whatever is involved, whether it is APA or the University of Ibadan, you just have to be consistent. It's not that the first reference is in APA format, the second is in Harvard. No, no, no. Then also ensure that your references are complete. I recall reading a proposal last week, Friday, and I only saw the author's name, the year of publication, and the title. It was difficult to tell whether it was a book or a journal article. So it's very important that you don't leave your readers guessing. Then the conclusion, my conclusion. The research proposal, it's very important to know that the research proposal should follow a simple and logical form of presentation. And then also you need to present a strong sense of cohesion and orderliness. There must be a very clear, progressive presentation of ideas. It must build from one to the other. There must be that logical flow of ideas. Then also state your problem. It's very important because I was at a seminar sometime last week and it was it was not very clear what the student was trying to do. So, but it's very important that you must be able to effectively communicate your problem and your aims and objectives. All right, and don't forget, emphasize the uniqueness of your proposed study. All right, then also the proposal is all about you. It's a reflection of your intellectual capacities and also the quality of scholarship. Now, don't forget, your proposal must be well organized. You need to properly use headings and subheadings. Then no one-line paragraphs. One-line paragraphs, they put me off. I hate saying one-line paragraphs. So please, I was very pleased when the previous speaker also mentioned that. So please make sure that your paragraphs are well constructed. I love this movie, Finding Forrester. That's one of my favorite movies of the 20th century. And in that movie, it's about an elderly, a veteran writer who advises a young Black American on how to run the art of writing. And he tells him that write your first draft with your heart and the second draft with your head, all right? While you follow the others, so when you are writing your first draft, ensure that you follow the sequence of the proposal. Then present your information in its raw state, just as you have it in your head. Then in your second and also your subsequent drafts, you just keep refining till you are fully satisfied. I remember I had 4 drafts. I produced 4 drafts before I finally gave my first copy to my supervisor to read. So you keep refining till you are satisfied. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so very much, Doc. Thank you so very much for that insightful presentation, the anatomy of a research proposal. Very appreciated indeed. I hope in the chat we have some questions. Dr. Mmutle will just field those for us, but we'll also open the floor for questions. Well, as you're talking, Dr. Todu, I had this question in my mind, and it is linked with what we were discussing in our previous session on Monday. How does one develop? This is the question that most of our students, they tend to ask. How do I get to a point where I'm able to identify these contradictions and these inconsistencies? Are you in a position to can help give tips on reviewing literature such that one will be able to spot these, and how do you present them? As in, I'm finding your own voice to convey that I have been able to see that so and so and so contradicts so and so and so, and there's a need to find common gap in this area. Any tips around that?
Okay. Would you like me to respond now?
Let me give Dr. Mmutle to field some questions so that perhaps you can respond to them in a bracket, questions that are in the chat, and then we'll open the floor as well. Again, Dr. Mmutle, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Molale, and thank you, Dr. Tulo, for this wonderful presentation. Much enjoyed, and thanks for sharing your insights and experiences as well. of what informs a research proposal. And I like the manner in which you have decided to coin your presentation. And as Dr. Molale also referred to earlier, the anatomy of a research proposal, meaning the bones, everything that relates to a proposal, what a research proposal should have and should not have. Most importantly, therefore, through this, you are advancing what you refer to as the frontier of research, giving us these insights, this knowledge. Colleagues, let me, in the chat, I have not noted any questions thus far. Let me invite everyone that has questions, comments, compliments for Dr. Tulo to share with us. I can read a comment, Dr. Tulo, from both Dr. Molale and Sponsor. And Dr. Molale simply said that Dr. Tulo makes reference to a proposal, or rather that a proposal is not a work of art. Do not use Shakespearean or flowery language, as you indicated earlier. Then Dr. Ponso further said that very useful insights, Dr. Tulo. I'm taking your teachings with me straight to my students. That is more than welcome. And I think that is what all of us would be doing, simply because of how you have simplified the manner in which we should understand what a research problem is, or rather a research proposal entails. Hawaii P20, thank you so much, Doc, for the informative session. Thank you, Hawaii P20. Any questions so far, colleagues? Okay, I have one here, Richard Adeleke. What is the role of a supervisor in a student's research proposal? At what level must a student begin a groundbreaking research? At the MSc, which is master's level, or PhD level? That is another question from Richard, including the one from Dr. Molale. May I give it to you, Dr. Tulo, to respond to the two? Then we'll take others after. Dr. Tulo?
Yes, thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. And I thank everyone for the kind words. I'll just go straight to the two questions. Yes, to the first question. Yes, how can you identify anomalies or paradoxes in the literature? I don't know. I think I have an eye for it, but also you need to develop that sense for it. So you need to develop, have an acute sense for these things. In my field, in my area of specialization, which is medical geography, there is a paradox known as the female paradox. Okay, I'm sure for those of you in gender studies or feminism would find this interesting, or you might have heard of it, which is females tend to have higher levels of morbidity, but lower levels of mortality. Okay, so what that means is that there's a tendency for more females to be ill, but the death rates are lower comparatively speaking, I mean, in relation to men. Okay, that is an example. So, I mean, if you were, an inquisitive or a curious researcher, you would want to know why. Why is it so? Okay. Another anomaly or contradiction that comes to mind is a country sees itself as the largest, Africa's largest economy, Africa's largest economy, but yet it is the world's poverty capital. It's the poverty capital of the world. You would see that there's some discomfort there for me, and also there is this. It's a paradox. It's an irony. All right. So these are the kind of things. Or why would a country extract fuel? Okay, extract its own fuel, and then also import refined petroleum products. All right. So these are the kind of things, and this comes from your readings. I mean, your readings of the literature, where you constantly, you engage the literature, you read to get knowledge, and also not just because you want to do an assignment or you want to write a paper, no, but you are seeking because you desire knowledge. All right, so it comes from reading. I think that is that's the way I can answer your question, Dr. Molale. To Richard's question, yes, the role of the supervisor is an advisory role, if I must put it bluntly or plainly. It's an advisory role. The onus lies on the student the student should be mindful of the fact that he is the driver of his research. Okay? He should be mindful of the fact that he's the driver of the research. So the supervisor, if you will permit me to use this analogy, is just a backseat passenger or maybe a front seat passenger. Okay, so you are the one driving the vehicle. So he or she would guide you on which turns to take, how fast you should move, or how slowly you should move, when you should take a turn, or when you should pull back, or when you should, you should park. So it's an advisory role, essentially an advisory role. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tulo, and for the response. I note in the chat, it's another form of a compliment or rather a comment from Annette, simply concurring with us that, or rather with your latter sentiment about the use of Shakespearean or flowery language in research, herself been guilty of that as well. That is noted, Dr. Digenat, sorry about that. Colleagues, questions? Other questions as well? And she further says in the chat, this is Annette now again. Yes, that links to the proposal. And that is what a student would ordinarily do. And I think this is informed again by your answer, Dr. Tulo. Any questions, colleagues? You can open your mic and speak. You are allowed. You are in that session of Q's and A's. Newa, I see your mic is on.
Oh, okay. I thought I was hiding here.
No, I always thank you. Newa.
Sure. No, it's just to say thanks to the doctor for for the really informative session, and for the emphasis on coherence in the proposal. One of the things that I've also been coming to learn is the need for us to understand the reasons behind the things that we do. So not just to say this is the aim of the study and leave it at that, but to actually understand what we mean when we say aim of the study. And I think this is part of what I've really enjoyed in the session so far, is understanding the reasoning behind the things that we're doing. Because from how the doctor already explained some of these things, you can see how if, for example, my objectives are not formulated very well, it makes everything else difficult, because methodologically I'm going to struggle. But if I'm clear, maybe one of my objectives is to explore whatever, that is already pointing me to certain methodologies that are designed for exploration and those sort of things. So it's just to really appreciate, and the issue of Shakespeare, the language of Shakespeare, because we don't want to be dull, but we also don't want to be too flowery. I think I'm also taking that thought with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Neo. Dr. Osayomi.
Yes.
Do you perhaps have anything to say on what Neo has said?
Well, I'll just say thank you, and I'm very pleased to know that you had a lot to take from my presentation, and I do hope you find it very useful.
Thank you, Dr. Osayomi. And I must say from my side as well, I really enjoyed your presentation, and this also links quite nicely with the earlier presentation we had from Dr. Liburu, meaning the two of you were strategically placed for today's session, simply because of more or less your presentations overlaps. So for us now, we have enjoyed your presentation and we have at least taken something with us, and I hope I'm not the only one, and I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody. But what is important is that there is what we call a takeaway from your presentation that one would be able to use as and when we advance or rather attempt to advise a number of students through the development of research proposals, including going through other chapters. What I liked about your presentation is what you also emphasize in terms of one's understanding that literature is important, reading is quite important as well. And this also came up in the previous presentation by Dr. Liburu to say one has to read and has to read widely as possible, so that when you need now to demonstrate or this voice in you must come out, as in when you interrogate these sources, their own inputs, their own arguments as well would assist and harness your own voice, as in when now it's your time to say, this is Mmutle, for instance, this is Molale, this is Osayomi, for instance. And that would be harnessed through the reading that we require from our own students. And I like the manner in which, therefore, you have approached your presentation, where you have also indicated the importance of a title, that it is the first thing that your supervisor would see, anybody that is going to assess your document would see, and that has to be catchy. It's supposed not to be longer, but it's supposed to say something about what is expected in the document going forward. And for that, we appreciate your presentation and we thank you once more. Thank you, Dr. Osayomi Tulo. Any other inputs, colleagues? I see Hamza. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Yes,
Abubakar? Yes, you can go ahead, Abubakar.
I thank the doctor for the straightforward and very short and educative presentation. My questions goes like this. As doctor said, the researcher is the driver, the supervisor is just the. But what in the case whereby you have conflict of interest pertaining maybe a kind of methodology or theoretical adaptation between you and the supervisor? So how can the researcher handle this, especially in academic line? Thank you.
Thank you, Abubakar. That is one of the interesting questions. It's quite nice. And before I give it to you, Dr. Tulo, let me read your comment in the chat so that when you respond to this question, you also give us your closing remarks. One individual by the name of Priscilla Mareki in the chat says, literature has been a bit of a challenge for me personally. These presentations are very insightful and eye-opening. Thank you very much. And this is Beth from your own presentation, Dr. Tulo. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Doc. Yes, I do know that oftentimes there are conflicts, okay, between the supervisor and students. But in a situation where you can't reach an agreement on maybe on any aspect of your research, the best thing is to reach a middle ground, okay? I found myself in such a situation, and I do know sometimes some supervisors could be very forceful or very imposing, but I do recall, in fact, this was an undergraduate student, and he or she was trying to present an idea to me, but it just didn't go well with me. And interestingly, this student was very, very insistent, was adamant. So I decided to just, okay, let me give him the opportunity, had the opportunity to express himself. And I found out that his ideas, or our ideas were even superior to what I had in mind. So Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's also good on the side of the student to also listen to what the supervisor said, because don't forget, he or she is holding an advisory role, has an advisory role. And theoretically speaking, okay, they are more far experienced than students. So they've seen quite a lot and they've done a lot of research. So they will be in a better position to guide you on what to do. But the solution when the solution to where you reach an impasse is where you need to reach, there must be a compromise. That is just it. You have to reach a compromise. So thank you.
Thank you, Doc, for your last inputs and the manner in which you have responded to the questions. I hope everybody is satisfied with the responses from Dr. Tulo. If there is someone who has an issue to deliberate on or compliment, this is the opportunity before I pass the baton to Dr. Molale to wrap up. Anyone? Then from my side, thank you, colleagues, for sharing your questions with Dr. Tulo, including all of us, and for ensuring that at least we have quite nice deliberations. Thank you, Dr. Tulo. Dr. Molale, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mmutle. Colleagues, this is bringing us to the end of our session. I want to take this moment to thank our two presenters so much for availing themselves to come and share their experiences, insights on the research proposal. This is a first step or the first point of call in any study. As both presenters made mention, there's no research study that can be accepted in a university without having been presented, without its proposal having been presented first. So we thank you so much for sharing these insights. Thank you, dear students and colleagues, for your engagements in these sessions. Research is a very lonely road. As the two presenters were busy, on the floor, I was nostalgic about my own process, my own experience, and the hoops, the skips, the hurdles that I had to jump myself in my PhD studies. And I'm quite thankful to you presenters, because when I was going through the journey, I did not have the opportunity of having presentations like these ones, forums like these ones where I can come to learn. When I see Priscilla Mariki saying that, she was challenged, or she at times find it challenging in doing literature review, but thanks to these presentations, because one is able to get some semblance of sanity. How I wish I was seeing Priscilla. I had this opportunity to receive this kind of training myself, but it is well. It is well, and we are thankful to our presenters, and we are thankful for this kind of a presentation. Just quickly to give some housekeeping rules, I gave you or some logistics, to convey some logistics. If you go into the chat platform, you will see that I've shared with everybody the links for these presentations. You are aware that we are overlapping into next week, so the next session will be on Monday, the 31st of May, and we will be proceeding with the presentation. So we do not have any presentations for this coming Friday, and the link is there. We will share it with you. We have shared it with you. You are more than welcome to copy it, save it, or share with anybody who you think might benefit from this. We welcome anybody. This session was also live on YouTube. We will share with you the links to the session if maybe you might want to reflect on the discussions at a later stage. From my end, and also from Dr. Mmutle, we want to thank you so much for your attendance, and let us meet on Monday, the 31st of May at 4 p.m.
Thank you so much, Mike.
May I request our presenters and other presenters of other sessions to please remain so that we can do debriefing. Those who attended as presenters of other sessions, as well as our today's presenters, can you please remain? To everyone else, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.